Only a tiny percent of you are subscribed with the bell on. And that means you're missing the scariest stories we drop. If you love chills down your spine, subscribe now and hit that bell. It truly helps keep this channel alive. When I turned 21, I joined a wildlife field training camp for university credits. It was set in the dense Greenwood Ridge of northern Colorado. The summer there was cool and dry, perfect compared to my sweltering hometown of Phoenix. There were 9 of us total, including Olivia, a no-nonsense forest guide who'd spent 12 years in the region tracking predators and training rangers. For nearly 3 weeks, our group trekked through designated portions of Greenwood's protected zones, documenting rare vegetation and observing forest patterns. Our days were repetitive but peaceful. Wake at sunrise, map our route, collect soil samples, photograph nests, and return to our clearing by dusk. Olivia always carried fox spray and kept us sharp on safety procedures. But honestly, things seemed so calm that we mostly joked through the drills. The biggest nuisance was bug bites or twisted ankles. We camped 20 minutes off the mapped trails in a small hollow with old tarpaulin tents. Cell phones were useless that deep in the woods, and our only contact was an outdated satellite phone Olivia used once a day. At night, we'd eat over a camp stove while she told us stories, some clearly exaggerated, about strange disappearances and animal run-ins. We were skeptical. Nothing we saw ever looked dangerous. On the 3rd Monday, we hiked a less-used loop near one of the valley creeks. The storm the night before had left the earth fresh and fragrant. That day was slow-paced, sketching fungus patterns, examining lichen, checking for fox dens. We saw no one else, which wasn't unusual this far off the public paths. Around noon, we paused for lunch by a narrow brook. Olivia had picked a sunken area with flat stones and a fallen tree perfect for resting packs. I sat beside Miguel, a fellow student, as he carefully logged leaf samples. 2 others filled water upstream while the rest scattered, lounging and chatting. That's when Olivia suddenly rose and raised her hand. The entire clearing fell silent. Even the insects stopped. No birds, no buzzing, just the wind brushing the canopy. Her eyes fixed on something just beyond the ridge behind us. She didn't speak, just tightened her grip on the spray and scanned the woods. I looked where she was watching but saw nothing. Then, in a voice that cut through the stillness, she said, "Nobody move." Not a word. I froze, half-chewed granola bar in hand. Miguel slowly lowered his camera. Those further downstream hadn't heard her clearly, so she repeated, "Stay silent. Stay put." The tension was immediate. My eyes jumped between Olivia and the trees. Her fingers twitched on the spray. The air felt wrong, like the entire forest was holding its breath. Normally, even off-trail, there was always noise, squirrels rustling, birds chirping. But now, nothing. Olivia stepped slightly forward, her body tight, never breaking eye contact with something unseen. That's when I caught a glimpse, a shape between 2 trees. Tall, upright, definitely not an animal. It didn't fidget or shift like wildlife. It leaned just slightly as if observing. I couldn't make out a face, but it wore dark clothing, or maybe bark-colored camouflage. Whatever it was, it stood too still. Then Olivia said quietly, "Gather your things." Slowly, no sudden moves. We followed. Miguel closed his notebook with a soft click. A girl behind me was gently tucking away a thermos. I rose with my pack still unzipped, never turning from the woods. The figure vanished. We didn't wait. Olivia signaled us to leave in a line, stepping backward behind us, spray ready. Halfway back, I began to relax, until we saw it. 30 feet ahead, brushing out from a fern-covered slope, was a mountain lion. It moved slowly, like it knew we saw it and didn't care. Huge, powerful, pale tan with a jagged scar under its left eye. Its amber gaze swept across us, not curious, not startled, just indifferent. Nobody spoke. Olivia immediately crouched and motioned stillness. The lion didn't snarl or make a sound. It padded forward, nose close to the ground, probably catching our trail. My mouth dried. My pack, with food inside, hung open by my feet. It turned its head toward me. It got closer. 10 feet. 5. Then, too, its breath misted slightly in the cool air. I saw the lines of old dried mud in its fur, the raw scent of wild meat and musk. It sniffed my pack, nudged it, then looked up, right into my eyes. Just seconds. Then it turned back toward the woods. With a low sway of its shoulders, it melted into the brush. No one dared speak. Olivia raised her hand and whispered, "Wait." We waited. 20 minutes. Once sure it was truly gone, she told us to move. Quietly, back to camp. At base, she called it in. The rangers marked the sighting rare, almost unheard of in this section of the park. They didn't send anyone out. That night, we didn't light a fire. Just cold meals and silent glances at the trees. The next day, we shifted camp closer to the ranger station. We never saw the lion again, but I never let down my guard. Back home, I kept reliving that moment, its breath, its stare, its decision not to strike. It wasn't fear that lingered. It was awe. We forget that the wild doesn't operate on our comfort. We're not rulers out there, just tolerated visitors. I hike differently now, always with company, and never with an open pack. Are you a horror lover, craving something real? For just $2, dive into over 30 plus true and unique horror stories, each one different, each one unforgettable. Every story comes with a chilling visual in the background to pull you deeper into the terror. This isn't your average creepypasta. It's raw, suspenseful, and one of a kind. Get your ebook now, if you dare. When I was 18, we lost my aunt to liver failure, and it shook the whole family. She had lived with us for her final 6 years, so once she was gone, everything about the house fell off. I missed her clunky slippers on the hardwood, and her habit of reciting trivia aloud during morning shows. Aunt Diane loved her structure: toast with jam at 5:30 a.m., crosswords in the sunroom, and asleep by 9 p.m. sharp. After she passed, the silence in our house was unbearable. My mom took it the worst. Despite their rough history, Mom had become Aunt Diane's caregiver during her final months. I often heard their late-night talks, even when Diane barely had energy to respond. Mom started changing after the funeral. She rarely spoke. She'd sit in Aunt Diane's old recliner, staring at the TV without even turning it on. At first, we thought it was just her grieving process. But then things got strange. She started placing little snacks in front of the recliner, orange slices or tea, just how Diane liked it. I didn't say anything, but my brother Dan did. They fought about it a few times. One night, Dan shouted, "This is unhealthy. She's gone." Mom didn't respond. She just kept tidying up Diane's slippers like she expected her to return. Then one morning, Mom casually mentioned that she'd found ways to communicate with Diane. She said it like she was talking about a new diet. She showed me a beat-up book she'd bought from a thrift store about communicating with spirits in transition. There were notes all over it, dates, phrases, herbs, and odd rituals. I've always had a weird sensitivity to things, though I rarely talk about it. A few months before Diane's diagnosis, I'd felt something was wrong. Just this heavy feeling in my chest that lingered. I'd had the same sensation before Grandpa Ben's stroke years earlier. But this obsession of Mom's felt dangerous. Soon, she started leaving the front door slightly ajar at night. When I confronted her, she whispered, "She needs a way back in." She began visiting strange online groups, forums full of people talking about spirit communication. One night, she introduced me to a woman named Leora Vale. Her website looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005, and her photo was a grainy image of her holding what looked like a crystal ball. Leora offered house visits for a fee, $250 cash. I told Mom it sounded like a scam. She stared at me and said, "You don't understand. She can help us." Leora arrived on a Thursday just after sunset. She wore a floor-length coat with fringes, at least 6 scarves, and heavy silver jewelry that clanged with every step. Her eyes were lined dark, and her fingernails were painted midnight blue. She carried a large bag that smelled like incense and mothballs. My dad refused to be part of it. He left to stay at my uncle's for the night. I stayed, mostly to keep an eye on Mom and this odd woman. Leora walked through the house slowly, brushing her hands along the walls, murmuring things like energy pathways and memory imprints. She eventually set up in the sunroom, where Diane used to sit. She turned off all lights, unplugged electronics, and laid thick yellow candles in a formation I didn't recognize. She placed strange crystals, citron, hematite, and something she called black moonstone. Around a bowl of dried herbs she set ablaze. The smoke filled the room quickly and stung my eyes. Then came the chanting, low, rhythmic, in some exaggerated accent. She told Mom to hold a photo of Diane and repeat her full name 3 times. Mom obeyed without blinking. Then Leora asked if we had any of Diane's favorite foods. Mom fetched a container of lemon custard pie, her favorite dessert, and placed it on a saucer near the picture. "She is near," Leora whispered. She kept waving her hands over the candles, murmuring, "Come forth," again and again. At one point, she paused and said, "She's standing behind the curtain." I looked. Nothing was there, just the dark windows. "She's hungry," Leora said. "She's asking to be let in." The next morning, I woke up to a horrible smell. I walked into the sunroom and nearly gagged. Flies, dozens of them, crawling over the untouched slice of pie. It was barely 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, way too cold for flies. Mom entered and stared at them, whispering, "She's here." I said nothing. More strange things happened. The living room lights began to flicker. Old floorboards creaked in unfamiliar patterns. Items began to vanish. First Diane's reading glasses, then her crochet needles, and finally her favorite mug, which had been on the kitchen counter the day before. I couldn't sleep. The house felt off. I started dreaming of someone walking the halls at night. One afternoon, when I was home alone studying, I heard heavy footsteps from upstairs. Our dog had passed away last year. My brother was at school. I grabbed a wrench from the drawer and called Mom. "There's someone up there," I whispered. Her response chilled me. "It's just Diane." I climbed the stairs, heart pounding. Diane's old room door was wide open. The air inside smelled like lavender cigarettes, something she hadn't smoked since rehab. I backed out and left the house, locking the door behind me. I didn't return that night. The next morning, muddy barefoot tracks trailed from the back door to the hallway. Not mine. Too big. I told Mom. She just looked hollow. We checked the windows. The one in the basement had been forced open. That afternoon, we called the police. They found no one inside, but advised us to install cameras. 3 days later, I found Diane's missing slipper in the garden, half buried in the dirt. Muddy. We followed a trail into the woods behind our property. Maybe 15 minutes in, we found a makeshift camp. A tarp between trees. Empty cans. Some of our belongings. Her mug filled with rainwater. The custard pie, moldy and swarmed with ants. The police caught the man, a drifter, 2 blocks away, sleeping in a greenhouse. He admitted sneaking in through the basement. During the seance, Leora had gone down to bless the space and had left the window unlatched. She'd also left food in vents and under furniture, part of her act. She'd scammed other families too, planting proof of spirits to justify her services. The lights? Faulty wiring. The creaks? Old heating pipes. The buzzing? Mold buildup near our faulty furnace. An inspector flagged our carbon monoxide levels, just enough to cause headaches, hallucinations, and insomnia. We replaced the furnace, added CO detectors, and things slowly got better. We sold the house 2 years later. The new owners called once about strange plumbing noises. We told them to check everything twice. Now I sleep fine. I don't hear whispers, but I lock every door and every window, and I never, ever leave food out. Because grief doesn't always bring back spirits. When I was 12, my parents were deep in a mess of arguments and blame. It wasn't just the yelling that wore me down. It was the silence in between. We lived in a tiny town near the Blue Brush Hills, a place place where neighbors knew too much about each other. My parents, Aaron and Paul, were fighting nonstop about bills, trust, and Dad possibly being laid off from the tire plant. They barely noticed I was around. I was just someone else to manage. Our house was old, built before central heating was common, with windows that never sealed right and vents that coughed out more dust than warm air. My bedroom was upstairs, and I'd escape there every chance I got. I'd play the same old puzzle games on my outdated tablet, volume up high to drown them out. Some nights, I locked my door and slept with earbuds in just so I wouldn't hear them breaking dishes or blaming each other for everything going wrong. Outside my window was a dirt trail that led into the woods. I used to stare at it before bed, watching hikers pass during the weekends, people who looked free. Couples, old folks, even kids a few years older than me. I always wished I could be with them, just leave and disappear for a while. One night, I went to bed like always, window shut, door locked, music low in my ears. I remember the hum of my fan, a glass of water by my bed, and the sound of the wind brushing the trees. Then nothing. Next thing I knew, I was waking up lying on wet grass with my face half buried in the flower bed under my bedroom window. My shirt was soaked, my head pounding. I tried to sit up, but felt like I'd been thrown down a hill. My mom's scream snapped me back. Porch lights flicked on. My dad ran out barefoot. I was rushed to the ER with scrapes, bruised ribs, and a mild concussion. They asked if I jumped. I didn't remember jumping. The doctor suggested sleepwalking, probably from stress. My parents accepted that idea too easily. They bolted the windows the next day. I was sent to a therapist in the next county, twice a week. She asked questions I didn't have answers to, made me draw pictures of the house and how I felt. I drew a plain square with no doors. The scariest part was the dream. It came every night for a while. In it, I'd hear a low man's voice calling my name from outside my window. I'd sit up, open the window, and climb out without hesitation. Then I'd walk toward the trail, peaceful and calm. I never felt fear in the dream, but waking up in that flower bed, that was something else. When I was 14, things hit a breaking point. The counseling didn't fix anything. At school, I got detention for mouthing off, skipped class because it didn't matter. My dad accused my mom of lying about credit card bills. One night, she smashed a plate against the counter and didn't even react. I listened from my room, headphones off. When Dad shouted, "I don't even recognize you anymore," I quietly packed my bag. I didn't plan to run away forever. Just a night. I wanted them to worry, to realize I mattered. I left a short note on my pillow. "I'm safe. I need space. Maybe now you'll notice me." Then I slipped out the back door and headed for the path in the woods. It was just past 5 in the evening, light still out. I planned to walk an hour in, sit, then come back. I passed some familiar spots, an old log bridge, a rock that looked like a giant shoe. But after a while, the trees all started to look the same. I missed my landmarks. I kept walking, hoping to find one of them again. But I didn't. The sun dropped. The woods turned eerily silent. No phone signal. Every direction looked like where I'd just come from. My hoodie wasn't warm enough. The cold bit into my arms. I curled under a fallen log to block the wind, wrapped in leaves and dirt. I thought I saw lights at times. I heard whispers, even thought I saw my dad at one point calling my name. But nothing was really there. In the morning, I was dizzy, thirsty, and numb. I tried walking in circles, hoping to find the trail again. I didn't. Then I saw her, a woman in a red jacket, just standing between the trees. When I blinked, she vanished. That's when I knew I was seeing things. Soon after, I heard real voices. Radios, names being called. A rescue crew found me about 17 hours after I'd left. They wrapped me up, carried me out. I kept asking if they'd seen the woman. They said I was hallucinating from cold and dehydration. At the hospital, my mom hugged me like she hadn't in years. My dad held my backpack and didn't let go. They looked different, shaken. That night, Dad finally said, "We should have seen it coming." For once, they didn't just throw me into therapy and move on. We started going together to family counseling. It wasn't perfect, but it got better. They argued less. I was included more. Decisions, routines, suddenly I mattered. I never hiked alone again after that. I don't even walk near the woods anymore. They're too quiet, too easy to get lost in. I stick to sidewalks. At least there, I know the way back. When I was 17, my friend Theo and I were really into wilderness survival stuff. Not in a creepy way, more like we just binge-watched videos of people building huts with nothing but a stick and some mud. We wanted to try a little version of that ourselves. We figured a quick trip to the wooded ridge behind our subdivision in northern Colorado would do the trick. It stretched along the edge of a dried-up creek and was full of pine and cottonwood trees, perfect for testing our bushcraft skills. Theo brought his dad's old camping axe, kind of beat up but still sharp. I had a drawstring bag with some rope, my pocket knife, and a couple of granola bars. We weren't going on some wild expedition, just heading about 20 minutes out past the last houses, far enough for it to feel like nature but close enough to home. We wanted to find straight sticks for makeshift arrows, or maybe a spear. It had rained earlier that week, so the forest floor was littered with fallen limbs and damp bark. Theo took it seriously, checking every branch like it was a competition. I mostly wandered behind him, collecting the decent ones he tossed aside. We were joking about school and video games when I realized how quiet the forest had gotten. The usual noise, birds, insects, wind through the leaves, had faded. It wasn't sudden, just off. Theo noticed too. "Dude, do you feel that?" he asked in a low voice. "Like what?" I asked. "Like someone's here." I laughed, but it was nervous. It reminded me of the stories my cousin used to tell about this area being haunted. I always thought he just made that up to keep me out of his secret hangout spots. We kept walking, trying to shake the feeling, but it only grew stronger. The wind picked up and made the trees sway like they were alive. Shadows stretched across the mossy ground, and every time a branch cracked, I flinched. We reached a small opening surrounded by trees with twisted limbs, like they'd been clawed at by something. Theo crouched down again to peel bark off a good branch when he suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "No," I said, trying not to sound worried. "Thought I heard branches snapping," he muttered. I checked my phone, no signal of course. I found a broken antler half buried in the dirt. It looked like it had been forcefully snapped. That made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Theo stood up and whispered, "Let's grab a few more sticks and head out." From that point, we stayed close, barely speaking. We moved toward the edge of the clearing, and that's when I spotted something strange, footprints. Fresh ones, too, big, deep, and leading away from where we came in. Definitely not ours. Theo squatted to look closer. "You think someone's out here?" I didn't know how to answer. Then came the crunch. A soft, slow step somewhere in the trees. We froze. I turned just in time to see something, or someone, move between the trunks. A shadowy figure in dark clothes, crouched and darting from tree to tree. I thought maybe a hunter at first, but there was no bright vest, no weapon, no sense of purpose. Just a guy acting like he didn't want to be seen. Theo noticed too. He squeezed my arm and pointed to where the figure had vanished. The man wasn't moving like a hiker. He was creeping, peeking around trees, ducking low, always watching. When he appeared again, he was closer, maybe 25 yards away. His face was half hidden, his jacket torn, and he just stared. He didn't say a word. Didn't ask if we were okay or lost. Just stood there like he was trying to decide something. Then he moved again, faster this time, but still quiet, almost circling. Theo grabbed my wrist. "We're leaving. Now." We didn't run, not yet. But we walked fast, heading back the way we came. Every few steps, I heard him, behind us, but never close enough to see clearly. Just snapping twigs, a shadow, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. The way he kept pace without ever catching up, it was like he was trying to hurt us, not chase us. Once we hit the path leading back to the neighborhood, we broke into a jog. Then a full sprint. My chest burned, my legs throbbed, but I didn't stop until we hit the road. We stood there, panting, looking back into the trees. Nothing. Just silence. Theo hunched over, gasping for breath. I mumbled. He didn't follow us out. Theo just shook his head. That guy wasn't normal. We didn't tell his dad when he came to pick us up. Just said we were tired. That night, Theo texted me. We're keeping this to ourselves, right? I agreed. We didn't go back to those woods. Not even close. 2 days later, I saw a local news story. A man had been arrested after hiding out in the woods near the highway. Turns out he'd escaped from a low-security facility in Utah about a week earlier. Convicted for assault, not murder, but still dangerous. He'd been stealing from campsites and avoiding detection moving east. They showed a picture of him being led into a police car. Same black jacket, same wiry frame, same look I'd seen through the trees. The police said he hadn't hurt anyone during his escape, but he was considered unpredictable and potentially violent. That explained everything. He wasn't out there camping or lost. He was hiding, and maybe, just maybe, he'd seen an opportunity when he spotted us. We were lucky. That's all it was. I still hike, but never alone, and never without telling someone where I'm going. Some people don't want to be found, and if they are, it's by accident. When I was 7, my Aunt Sherry owned a cabin hidden near the edge of the Bitterroot Mountains in northern Idaho. It was a crooked old structure, long and narrow, with sun-bleached wood, a sagging tin roof, and a wraparound porch that moaned when you stepped on it. A gravel road curved through the dense trees until it reached the clearing where the cabin stood. We'd parked beside a handmade fire ring surrounded by those cheap plastic lawn chairs, the kind that tip over if you breathe wrong. Every year, on the last weekend of July, our extended family would crowd into that little corner of wilderness. Uncles, cousins, grandparents, we were all there. The grown-ups grilled hot dogs and drank too much. Us kids tore through the trees playing tag with sticks. After dark, we'd gather around the fire for stories. Aunt Sherry had this eerie, slow way of speaking that made her ghost tales feel real. She'd spin yarns about things like an old miner who vanished into a cave and never came out, or a pack of giant wolves that only howled when the wind blew east. Usually, I'd be sent to bed before the tales got too scary. I'd lay on the cot in the back room, trying to fall asleep to the sound of cicadas and laughter from the porch. But one night, one I've never been able to forget, the air was thick and sticky with heat. I kicked my sheets off and stared out the small window that overlooked the fire pit. I could still hear my uncle cracking up at something Sherry had said when a sharp shout cut through the night. Not laughter, not playing, just a sharp, panicked yell. Then came running footsteps. A second later, the cabin door slammed open. My mom and Sherry stumbled in, wide-eyed and breathless. Sherry threw the deadbolt shut and stood there, staring at the door. My mom said something shaky, and they both hurried into the kitchen. I pressed my ear against the wall, but only caught broken phrases. Not right. Shouldn't be walking out here. Not drunk. Their laughter sounded off, like they were pretending not to be scared. Eventually, I must have dozed off. When I woke the next morning, everything was quiet. The fire pit was cold, and the grown-ups were quietly packing. No one seemed in the mood to joke. I asked what happened. My mom just smiled and said, "Just a hiker who wandered in. Thought we were a ranger post." Sherry nodded, but didn't look at me. Her eyes kept drifting toward the tree line. Later, in the car, I brought it up again. My dad changed the subject. My mom looked lost and said she hadn't heard anything strange. I pushed, but my dad cut me off with a sharp, "It was nothing. Let it go." We didn't go back the next summer, or the one after. Sherry started dodging questions, said the cabin needed work. But it was weird. She used to love those family weekends. Years passed, and we only returned once, when I was around 11. Just us. The cabin looked the same, but Sherry acted differently. The second the sun dipped, she made sure all the doors were locked and the curtains shut. She'd installed motion sensor lights at the edge of the clearing, tall, bright poles that lit up the trees like a stadium. When I asked about roasting marshmallows, she shook her head. Not tonight. We don't want to draw animals. But there weren't any animals. Not even birdsong. The older I got, the more I thought about that night. Around campfires with friends, I'd try to talk about it. But whenever I asked my parents, they'd brush it off. "You were a kid," my dad would say. "Nothing really happened." Sherry would just shake her head. "You imagined most of it." But I knew I didn't. When Sherry got sick and landed in the hospital, I went to see her. She looked frail, her cheeks sunken, a mask over her nose. But her eyes were alive. She waited until we were alone, then said, "You remember that night? The one when your mom and I ran inside?" I nodded. She looked away for a second, then said, "I never told you what we actually saw." She explained that they were sitting by the fire when they heard footsteps in the woods. Not a deer, not wind, heavy steps. They thought it was a bear, so they grabbed a flashlight. Then, out of the shadows, a man, or something close, stepped into the firelight. He was short, maybe 5 feet, dressed in filthy layers and a torn coat bound with cord, hair long and tangled, his face streaked with mud and what looked like blood. But the way he moved was wrong. He'd lurch forward, stop, then jerk again, like someone yanked on invisible strings. Then he screamed. It was part English, part gibberish, like several languages jammed together. "You thieves! You bring fire. Burn forest. Steal what's mine." He had a huge branch in one hand like a club. He wasn't just mad, Sherry whispered. He looked possessed. He charged. No hesitation. My mom screamed. Sherry grabbed a chair. But they didn't fight. They ran. The man chased them. She said his breath sounded like a dog panting behind them. A rock smashed into a tree inches from her head. They made it inside, locked the door, and huddled in the kitchen with knives. All night, they heard him pacing around the cabin, whispering, scratching at windows. Once, he slammed something heavy against the wall. The next morning, he was gone, but deep gouges had been carved into the wood. Around the fire pit, they found symbols in the dirt, circles, lines, and triangles, arranged in some kind of ritual pattern. A few weeks later, they heard more. The sheriff said locals called him the Crawler. No one knew his name, just that he'd lived off-grid since the early 80s, wandering the forests. Some said he'd been in the military. Others claimed he'd escaped a hospital. There were scattered reports, campers being chased, tents slashed, rocks thrown. One group said he followed them for a mile, always just beyond their flashlight beams. Sherry said she never felt safe there again. That's why she stopped inviting people. She didn't want anyone else near that place. "Your mom and I never told anyone," she said. "We were afraid people wouldn't believe us. But I can't leave without saying it out loud. You need to know what that place really was." She died 2 weeks later. At her funeral, people talked about her love for the outdoors and her spooky stories. No one mentioned the cabin. No one knew the truth. Months later, I found an article online. A body had been discovered deep in the Bitterroot backcountry. A man in his 60s, unidentifiable, malnourished, died from exposure. He wore layers of torn clothes, long hair, a makeshift hut full of cans, carvings, and symbols etched into the walls. Authorities listed him as a transient, but I knew it was him, the Crawler. I've never gone back. I don't plan to. I used to find peace in the forest. Now I just wonder what's still hiding in the dark. I've been leading mountain tours in the Cascade Range of Washington for over a decade now, and I thought I'd seen it all. But last September, something happened on a 3-day hike to Eagle's Crest that I still can't wrap my head around. There were 14 tourists in our group. My co-guide Tara and I had a routine. Every final morning, we'd hike ahead at dawn to make sure the trail conditions were safe. That morning we left camp at 5 a.m., bundled up and wearing headlamps since the fog was so thick you could barely see 5 feet ahead. Half a mile up the slope, we heard rustling in the trees. At first, we figured it was another early hiker, but when the figure stepped out of the mist, I knew something wasn't right. The guy looked about 50, maybe older. His outfit? A flimsy cotton tee, old slacks, and thin running shoes. Definitely not cold weather gear. No jacket, no backpack, nothing. He was hugging himself, shivering badly, and his lips had this purplish tint like he was freezing. I stepped in front of Tara and said, "You all right, man?" He nodded slowly, but his eyes were twitching around like he didn't even know where he was. "Been walking from the station. 2 nights," he slurred. The problem? The nearest station was nearly 50 miles out, only accessible by dirt road, and there's no way he hiked that in those clothes. When I asked where he started, he muttered something about heading west and kept saying cold, just kept walking. Tara whispered, he could be hypothermic, or maybe high. We offered to take him back to our camp, where we had food and warmth. But then he asked something that made my skin crawl. "Anyone else with you?" We hadn't said a word about the group yet. That set off alarm bells. I lied. "Nope, just the 2 of us." He stared like he didn't believe it. I told him we had spare jackets, and he took 1 step closer, then froze again. "You got service?" he asked. "Lost my phone. It was here, now it's gone." We told him there was no signal out here. After that, he started repeating, 2 nights. I kept walking. He wouldn't take the emergency blanket Tara offered. Instead, he kept looking at our gear. Then suddenly, he turned and sprinted into the fog. We stood there stunned. I considered going after him, but it was too risky. Instead, we waited, then carefully followed the direction he ran. About 30 feet in, Tara spotted a muddy footprint, the same tread as his shoes. Another print led us deeper, but the pattern was erratic, like he was lost. Eventually, we found a torn piece of his shirt snagged on a branch. But then behind us, we heard a heavy crunch, like someone stepped on a branch on purpose. Nothing in sight, just mist and shadows. We decided to get back. Once on the main trail, we headed toward camp. About 10 minutes down, we saw him again, just standing there on the path, arms limp, eyes locked on us. I said, "There's fire and food back at camp. Come with us." He tilted his head and asked, "Where's your camp?" "We're not far," I said. "We'll help you warm up." He stepped forward. "I don't need help. Just tell me where your group is." I froze. "Why?" "I saw them yesterday. 14 of you. 2 blue tents, red tarp over the kitchen, yellow cooler near the log pile." My stomach dropped. He'd been watching us. When we didn't respond, he asked Tara directly, "Got a jacket or not?" She handed him one, but he grabbed her wrist tightly. "What are their names?" he said. "The girls. What are their names?" I shoved him hard, and he staggered back, eyes wide and manic. "You don't get it," he yelled. "You're not in charge here." Then he bolted again, this time toward the direction of our camp. Tara hit our GPS beacon's emergency call, which would alert rangers. We took off down a side trail, hoping to intercept him. The fog was lifting just enough to see tree trunks now. Ahead of us, we caught glimpses of him moving fast through the brush. Tara radioed in, guide team to base. Male intruder, armed, possibly unstable, headed toward group campsite. Response came quick, 2 rangers en route. ETA 18 minutes. Maintain distance. We crouched behind trees near the clearing. He moved in low like he was sneaking. Then we saw it, a small blade glinting as he pulled it out from his waistband. He stopped just 10 feet from one of the girls' tents. We made noise. Nothing loud, just enough to let him know he wasn't alone. He turned, spotted us, and ran again, this time into the woods on the far side of camp. I radioed again. Suspect fleeing east, still armed. We got everyone up, moved the group close together, and kept them calm by telling them a bear was in the area. 40 minutes later, rangers arrived. They didn't waste time. After collecting our reports and GPS logs, they tracked him down within the hour. Turns out, he was a convicted felon from Oregon, skipping parole. They found zip ties, gloves, and marked campsite maps in his bag. He'd been living in the forest for weeks in a hidden shelter. Two of our hikers were solo female backpackers who had pitched their tent at the edge of the site, the exact tent he was approaching. We were lucky. The group was lucky. That morning, our instincts weren't just paranoia, they were survival. Sometimes, what you're afraid of in the wilderness isn't nature, it's who's hiding in it. That was today's scary stories. Tell me in the comments, what part scared you the most? Got your own creepy story? Share it below. I might use it in a future video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching Dreadful Nightmares. See you in the next one.